Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 327 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host. He is, of course, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way on the Hell site, formerly known as Twitter. Adnan, welcome back to the show. Exciting off-season here. Things, I'll just say, the tenor around this team since the draft has gotten noticeably more positive, and I'm happy about that for sure. But on an overall note, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm doing well, and yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Here's the thing. We're so not used to having, a draft that we like, a draft that we're sort of positive toward, that it's a nice change of pace. And I kind of forgot, just how much a good vibes draft can sort of carry you through in the off season. Because right now we're in May, and I feel like the vibes are going to be high coming off of this draft, throughout rookie mini camp into training camp, and the rookies are going to be the talk of training camp. Like a really strong draft sort of takes you, even through the preseason, which the Falcons aren't going to be, starting anyone in the preseason. I'll get mad about that one when it's time to
We'll
get back
cross
to
that
the
bridge when we
season.
get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's clockwork for me. That's going to be months from now. But yeah, it's normally the draft, brings about some mixed to negative vibes, and then we have that sort of dark cloud hanging over us over the course of the off season, and then it kind of turns out then we try to get positive, near the start of the season, and it turns out that more often than not we're right all along about the draft being bad when the season starts. But now it's a very nice change of pace.
Yeah, exactly. And I I'm certainly happy about it. Some people probably like negativity. Some people seem to thrive in it, right? It's not something that we typically like. I mean, I think you and I are both of the mind that the better this team does, the better it is for us. We both like covering a team that's performing well and doing good things. It's much more fun to talk about that than,
Yes,
I mean,
for the love of God,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
please. Like, I won't lie. Like, I have been negative, in my takes around this team for like the past few years, but it's like, how can you sort of not be,
yeah,
given that they win like 7 games every year? Last year they had the higher watermark of 8. They had 4 a couple times there, but it's like, y- you know, I would much rather, like, have the vibes be good because I'm more fans of this team. Like, but I've noticed even some of the negative Nancy's on Twitter have been like, yeah, no, this the arrow's pointing up, so it's like, who knows what's happening there.
yeah. We're all ready to be hurt again. That's for sure. This team just knows how to suck us back in, but at least this time we have a good reason to have hope, and that's sort of the crux of tonight's show, folks. Is have the Falcons really improved this offseason? Have they improved in a meaningful way that could, emphasis on could, result in more wins in a winning season, maybe even a playoff berth that we've all been sort of desperately looking for since 2017, right? I mean, it's been a long time. It's been a long time. So we're gonna get into that sort of the overall outlook. We've had a couple weeks now to sort of sit on this draft class and process it. So sort of looking at this offseason holistically, you guys know I wasn't high on the free agent class. I don't think anyone was super high on the moves they made. They were limited in what they could do, so it wasn't totally surprising. But outside of that, what has this team done as a whole, and how does it look? Can we start to see a cohesive plan come together? And we'll talk about that tonight. That's our topic. Sort of, do we think this team has taken the steps forward that they need to take to compete for the division, to compete for a winning record, the playoffs, whatever that might be? We're going to get into all that tonight. So buckle up. We got a lot of things to cover, a lot of things to get to. We'll obviously talk about the most controversial thing today, which thankfully isn't Falcons scandal. It's Jalen Walker wearing number 11. So I'm thankful that that's the most
Yeah.
controversial thing we have to talk about tonight. Because
Thank
it's a
God it's
doozies.
something normal for a
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
But, like, it's like, and you know what? At the very least, the media cycle's finished. Ulbrich got fined, team got fined. We can move on. Nobody's mentioned it since like last week. So yeah. Like, hopefully the Falcons don't do anything else to sort of get themselves fined moving forward or
Yeah.
in trouble with the league.
Yeah, we got several months until training camp, so we got we got to keep it together here until the season starts at least. But guys, we're gonna get to a lot of good stuff tonight. If you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe. We appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Those things really help us out, help the videos get to more people, help the channel grow. Would love to get 10,000 subscribers here. Hopefully by the start of the season, or maybe the end of the season. That'd be a big milestone. So everyone, if you've already subscribed, thank you very much. If you haven't, consider it perhaps. But before we get started here with our topic of the night, going to bring you guys a real quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Folks, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, we're also into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and Bet Online has more ways than ever to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting options while the games are being played, which is a little too spicy for me. I'm one of those, like, I need to really crunch the numbers, like look for the like, you know, things that I like, the plays that I want to make, that sort of thing. And it still doesn't usually work, but that's just kind of gambling in general, right? Hey, it is what it is. But what I do know, even though I don't know the winning picks apparently most of the time, is that BetOnline's got the largest selection of odds on everything from MLB, NBA, NHL, even UFC, boxing, all that good stuff. And BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info in between games. They've also got an online casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live slots, all that good stuff. When you sign up, make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Take access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Adnan. So let's talk. We'll start things off, with the topic du jour, the breaking news that Jalen Walker will wear number 11, among some other number announcements that were less controversial. But this isn't really a big deal. It's more silly than anything. But the Falcons obviously have a lot of faith in Jalen Walker if they're gifting him this number right out of the gate. And I certainly hope he has as good of a career as the last Falcon to notably wear number 11, which I hope everyone here knows who that was. If you don't, then you must be really new to the Falcons. But welcome, I guess, in that case. But do you have a take on this at all? I mean, personally, I don't really care because the Falcons really don't retire numbers. It's not really something they've ever done. So to me, I don't get like offended by it or whatever. I know some people feel a certain type of way about it, but I'm curious if you have a take on it.
I mean, I was a little surprised because even though the Falcons don't officially retire numbers, like there's some unspoken numbers where it's like, okay, you sort of don't wear those, or the team doesn't give those to players with, let's be honest, they don't give them to players who have any sort of hope of really making the 53-man roster. Like every number is always going to be used just because you have more players than numbers sometimes, like especially on those training camp rosters. So it's like, you see it on one of those undrafted camp guys wearing, number 11, or maybe like, wearing number 2 or something like that. And it's like, that's just sort of standard procedure. I'm a little surprised that Jalen Walker, first round pick, he's definitely going to make, the 53-man roster. That's what we can talk about the guys on the roster bubble over the offseason. Jalen Walker isn't one of them. So yeah, it's definitely, I'm a little surprised about it because, number 10, Steve Bartkowski's old number, that's a number that, you don't ever really see any Falcons wearing. Obviously number 2, I thought number 11 was going to be in that same ilk of like, okay, like they're not really going to issue that number to anyone that really has a chance at making the team. And we won't really like see it. Like, the Falcons will unofficially sort of retire it. But it sort of tells me that, maybe like not everything is sort of water under the bridge with Julio. We do know that he still hasn't come back yet since being traded away. I do know that, it may have rubbed some people in the building the wrong way with that phone call with Shannon Sharp. It definitely rubbed some fans in the fan base the wrong way. So, it could be a sign that, maybe there is still a little bit of bad blood between Julio and the organization. I mean, we saw he wasn't there for Matt Ryan's jersey retirement ceremony along with the other Falcons legends. So yeah, despite all of that, I am a little bit surprised. I'm a little bit surprised. And also, like, the other thing for me that nobody's really talking about with this is 11 on a linebacker is kind of weird. Like, you don't really see that, so it's gonna be like really weird seeing someone, in the middle of the front seven wearing 11 just as a general thing. I know that the NFL has, really become very lax about which players can wear which numbers, and it's resulted in some players wearing some very creative numbers given, what their position is. So yeah, I'm a little bit. I was definitely a little bit surprised when I saw the announcement.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is bold of them to do something like that, in my opinion. I mean, I think I probably wouldn't have put that number on a rookie, but I guess that's just sort of how it is. Like, this team doesn't really reserve this team. And when we saw this team like give it to Logan Woodside, I think that was the clearest sign that they're not really planning to retire it. Obviously, I do think that there will eventually be reconciliation with Julio and the Falcons. I don't think it's an irreparable relationship or anything like that. It's something that will come back. But yeah, I mean, look, it's not like also like it was just some random number. Like, this is the number that Walker wore in college and all that stuff. So it's not like they're just randomly throwing 11 on him, right? I mean, that would have been weirder. But no one was currently wearing it. It's his college number. He's their number one pick. He's probably like they've typically given their number one pick like their choice of numbers. I mean, they gave Bijan 7, right, which was thought to be a sacred number.
I mean, Koo was already wearing 7.
That's true. That's true. But that was a kicker. It's kind of different, a little bit. But I agree. Like, I mean, it's sort of like nobody. I think it's kind of like it's not that big a deal. Now Walker needs to show that he's worthy of the 11, which I certainly have faith that he will. I'm very interested in Walker. You guys know, like, I don't want to pretend, something different. I was lower on Jalen Walker than most. But I'm really excited to have him in Atlanta. I do think betting on his upside, and especially at pick 15 as opposed to the top 10, makes a lot of sense. So I'm excited to see what he does. And, it's a bold choice going with number 11 on this team, considering what it means. But I think Walker seems like a bold guy, and I think he has designs on living up to that number, certainly here in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I won't lie to you. I can sit here and be like, oh yeah, I don't like, who cares? It's just a number, talking about 11. But I would kind of feel some type of way if they did like issue him number 2.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Or like anyone number 2. So it's like I can't really have it both ways. I do think 2 is a number where if the team does ever decide to retire one, that should be like the one they retire. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a number. Like it is. None of it's really going to matter when week 1 starts. It's just sort of off-season fodder and, something to talk about here in May, and something where it definitely did get the online discussions going.
Yeah. It was spicy. Certainly something that a lot of people, cared about enough to bring up. But yeah, I think ultimately it's not a big deal, but he does have to live up to it. If you're going to go for that number and what that represents, then you got to back it up. And I certainly hope that he will.
I mean, we've seen some rookies like, bold, like, in this year's. I mean, we saw it with Abdul Carter over New York, pretty much asking for 56. And,
yeah, that didn't go so well.
That didn't really work out over there.
Yeah, I do think it's like better that he isn't like a wide receiver. Like, that would be super weird, I think. The fact that he's like a different position entirely, I think makes it like a little bit better. So, it's up to Walker now to prove that he's deserving of that vaunted number here in Atlanta. So
I know the Falcons don't do it, but just in general, I do like the concept of teams retiring numbers in general, of like, okay, like this player was a legend, and it's a great way to sort of honor him. Like I think every NBA team does it at this point. A lot of MLB teams, or a lot of like NHL teams do that as well. So it's like I would never be against the idea of the Falcons, even though they don't officially retire any numbers. I'd never be against the idea of that like happening, and I'm not against those sort of unspoken rules of like, okay, this person wore it, so we're not really just going to issue it to just anybody.
Yeah, yeah. I do wonder if like they're sort of going to go about kind of quietly retiring it, like in that they won't give it to another receiver or they won't give two to another quarterback or something like that. Like sort of, they may need the number during training camp or whatever, because there are still some limits for numbers, like and stuff like
Camp
that.
is
So
different
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's sort of like just the sheer quantity of, like, some players are wearing, you'll sometimes have multiple players wearing the same number,
Yeah,
and
it
like
does happen. Yeah.
not,
So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it's not that big of a story. It's funny, and like I do hope. I mean, it's obviously a bold choice. He's gonna draw comparisons now to that type of player. I hope that he lives up to those expectations. Personally, that would be a home run pick. Obviously, if he was able to match even a certain percentage of what the previous number 11 was able to do. And I don't mean Logan Woodside, ladies and gentlemen. So, but yeah, I do like. I like the boldness. I don't know about, giving it out so soon, but I do like that it's like the other side of the ball. Like, it's kind of like, okay, that's a little bit, like, I don't have a problem with that nearly as much as if they just slapped it on another receiver. So we'll see how that plays out. Hoping for great things, obviously, with Jalen Walker, team's first round pick in this class. Yeah, and I mean, that could kind of lead us into our overall conversation about the state of this team and mostly the defense, right? Because I think we came out of free agency with the team kind of treading water on defense at best, and getting, worse on offense with the loss of Drew Dalman. So I think on the whole, you could say net, maybe they ended up not gaining any ground in free agency because of the loss of Drew Dalman. Coming out of the draft, how do you feel about this team as a whole? Like right off the top, do you think, looking at, with free agency and the draft now both behind us, do you feel like this team has taken a meaningful step towards improvement, or are we still sort of trying to tread water from what we saw in 2024?
I mean, I think they're definitely improved when you look at the long-term prospects of them, given, how much we like the defensive picks. Now, we do expect rookies in the NFL to contribute, especially rookies who were taken in the first round, and we both really like Xavier Woods, who was a third rounder, but probably should have gone much higher than, where he was taken in the draft. Overall, for 2025, I mean, that sort of will all depend on the quarterback at the end of the day. Like, this team will sink or swim. I don't want to say almost completely with Michael Penix, but let's be honest, like, it won't matter, anything that they have done, any sort of moves to support the quarterback and all of these ancillary moves around the roster. None of that will matter if Michael Penix doesn't sort of live up to at least some of those expectations of being a top 10 pick. And I mean, we all hope that he does. He definitely showed some really, positive traits in that Carolina game, especially. There was some stuff that, wasn't so great in that first game against, that first start against the Washington Commanders. Well, no, that was actually technically the second start.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was technically the second start. But, in that big ESPN game against the Washington Commanders. So it's at the end of the day, I think the quarterback will always be that great equalizer of, even if the roster underperforms around the quarterback in comparison to last year, it won't matter if the quarterback can sort of carry you to a couple of more wins versus if the roster is much better around and the quarterback plays poorly, then, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at the end of the day either. When you take quarterback away from the equation, I think the offense is a little worse in comparison year over year, just because I do rate Drew Dalman very highly. And, as good as Ryan Newsel was looking in relief last year, I don't think that he is as good as Drew Dalman is right now, or, hopefully he proves me wrong, but 2025 Newsel I don't think is going to be as good as 2024 Dalman. As for the defense, it's kind of it's kind of tricky because the defense did take a step up after the bye week last year. We do know about how poorly they performed from a sack perspective and from a pass rush perspective leading into the bye week. But I was looking at their finish overall, and in their total defense, I think they were like I want to say like in the teens versus scoring defense, they were 22nd, so they were still bottom 10 in scoring defense. But I'm looking at the defense this year, and as good as the rookies are, you did lose Grady Jarrett along the interior. We're really sort of relying on Rook Ororo to take a big step forward along the interior of the defensive line. I think the pass rush should be a little better, should definitely be better. The secondary, we'll see. Mike Hughes really played very well last year, and hopefully he'll at least be able to match that this season. But I mean, the defense, I would actually like really, I would sign up right now if this defense was in the low teens again this year.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
no, I agree. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know overall, just for a year over year, this year perspective, everything around Michael Penix, you know, I think maybe they broke. I mean, their ceiling is definitely much higher than breaking even from last year. Um, I'd say it's around the same, but everything will come down to the quarterback. And if Penix plays better than we saw Cousins play and we saw rookie year Penix play last year, then that's going to be enough to sort of get this team over the hump. But overall, meaningful improvement. It depends on the quarterback. Outside the quarterback, I would say it's maybe about the same, if not maybe slightly worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Like, I think the big crux of the Falcons being better on offense is Michael Penix, right? Like we're expecting Michael Penix to be that piece that elevates the team where Kirk Cousins sort of couldn't. Like Kirk Cousins, during the streak of games, like from basically week 2 to week 9 ish, Kirk Cousins was playing quite well. Like we saw that 6-3 run. Cousins really started to get it together. You could tell he was limited with what the team could do, like especially play action and having him move around basically at all. And if there was any pressure, he kind of just had to either throw it away or eat it. So there was limitations, but he was working around those limitations pretty well while he was healthy. And like I think that kind of gets buried in his 4-game slide after his injury that he of course hid, so that's part of the puzzle as well. Like Cousins wasn't terrible while he was healthy. The team was actually winning games, and that's great. So the question is like, not is Michael Penix better than Cousins' 4-game skid? Because the answer is obviously, right? Like of course Penix is better than the 4 games we saw of Kirk Cousins where he was unplayable and should have been benched weeks earlier because of how he was not capable of executing at that point. Penix being better than Cousins in that 6-3 run is kind of the crux. And I think there are certainly reasons to feel very enthused about Penix being an improvement on Cousins. Certainly he's able to execute more of the things that Zach Robinson will want them to do. The Falcons will be able to use a lot more play action, which I think was kind of a big part of what they wanted to do that they weren't able to do necessarily with Kirk Cousins in the lineup. Penix obviously has a much bigger arm and will be able to attack deeper with a lot more consistency and, safety as well. Like part of Kirk Cousins was capable of hitting deep shots, but the thing with Cousins was he needed it to kind of be set up perfectly and he needed to be able to plant his feet perfectly and all this stuff to be able to get the ball down to where it needed to go. And while he was healthy, he did a pretty good job of that. But Penix will be able to unlock that area of the field without having everything absolutely perfect. I mean, we saw him rip some throws on the run that were really impressive. We saw those tight window throws. We saw, a lot of good stuff in just a 3-game sample size when he was, unfortunately kind of just thrust into the starting lineup. And there's a lot of reasons I think we should expect a better version of Penix in 2025, given that he'll have all offseason to actually work with this receiving core where he kind of just had to get thrown in there, in practice and basically cobble it together. And we saw issues the first, week or two with timing, especially on the deep throws. That should be mitigated, right? It should be less of an issue. It should be something that they're able to work out in the offseason. So if Penix is ready to go week one with these weapons that we know are high caliber, right? I have no concern about Atlanta's weapons. There was a lot of people really upset, people that I respect, like really upset that the Falcons didn't add weapons. And I try to talk to these guys and be like, that's just not a priority for this team. Like, you've got 2,000-yard receivers. Darnell Mooney would have had well over 1,000 yards if he wasn't hurt. I mean, he finished with 980 or something like that. So 2,000-yard receivers. When's the last time this team had that? Not since Roddy White or since the last year with Pitts, where Pitts had the 1,000 yards. This team hasn't had that kind of receiving core with two great receivers in forever. Bijan Robinson is one of the top 3-4 running backs in the NFL. If you want to, leave room for interpretation there. Kyle Pitts is high potential, but if you look at him as their third receiving target, that's, people are like, oh, they should take a third receiver really high. Like, no, they need to find out if Kyle Pitts can be their third receiver. And if not, they need to move on this offseason and figure out what they need to do with them. So I think it's totally fine to have Kyle Pitts as your third receiving option. I think having him as your number one, given what we've seen the last couple of years, is not, a good idea. But given what we saw last year, there was clearly a connection building with Pitts and Penix. And what I really liked was we saw Pitts make a critical error where he fumbled, a pass that ended up being a turnover. And Penix didn't lose confidence in him, right? He continued to go back to him. And in the clutch, most critical moment of that Commanders game, he went to Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts delivered. And I that's obviously we're talking about sort of recency bias, right? That's the last sort of great play we saw from Kyle Pitts, so that's the one that sticks in our head. But I think there's more to that play than just being the last play. It's sort of we never really saw anyone trust Kyle Pitts with that throw up until we never really saw Kirk Cousins trust Kyle Pitts with that throw the entire time he was here. So that gives me some hope that Kyle Pitts can be the third receiving option in a three-headed receiving attack, which Bijan Robinson will also have quite a few targets in, and he's very good at it doesn't seem like adding another receiver to upgrade Ray-Ray McCloud was something that was worthy of using a pick on. Is that sort of your takeaway too?
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. The weapons are fine. This team has been investing premium assets in weapons for years. This was not sort of the year where you even had that luxury, given how many holes were on the defense. But yeah, also I do want to clarify, just before people come at my head for being negative. When I say this roster will be about the same, I don't say that as a bad thing. I think this roster last year was good enough to make the playoffs. Obviously they were limited by, Kirk Cousins down the stretch. And, I think they were a little bit limited by a lack of finishing drives and a lack of some execution on offense, given that, you look at the stats, they were the number 6 total offense in the league, but they were number 13 when it comes to scoring offense, tied for 15. So, that tells you that they were able to really move the ball up and down the field, but they just weren't finishing drives. And it's one of those things where, year 2, Zach Robinson, Bijan Robinson is another year older. Drake London is another year older. They're both going to be, organically, internally improved. And hopefully with Michael Penix, there is some more of that, red zone execution and, execution and finishing drives with touchdowns as opposed to field goals. And then also, Younghoe Koo last year was one of the worst kickers in the league. We haven't even talked about the special teams aspect, but, obviously I don't know I would like for them to bring in some kicker competition in training camp. We'll see what happens there. I think Koo is, making way too much money when you compare him to his peers, to have played as poorly as he did last year. I think he's one of the top 5 highest paid kickers from a salary cap perspective. And last year, I think only Justin Tucker missed more kicks, and Justin Tucker is out of there in Baltimore right now. But yeah, so it's I do definitely think that if the roster is about the same around Penix, that should be enough for this team to win 10 games this year, because I do have confidence that we will, have an overall improvement on the quarterback play from last year, given that, if you take everything into consideration with Cousins, the low start, the like very high peak, and then the like absolute like going off a cliff, I'd say Cousins was a little below average overall when you take everything into account. And I do think that Penix can exceed that this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you brought up a good point about Koo, and that, that situation is going to be one to monitor in camp. The Falcons did bring in competition for Koo, and I believe German kicker Lenny Krieg, who
I'm sorry. I forgot about
it's okay.
the German kicker who was, that completely slipped my mind. So yeah, there is already competition on the team when it comes to the kicker game, and this will be the first training camp / preseason where we have a legitimate kicker competition in a very long time. Like even the year after they moved on from Matt Bryant, like they had decided to hand over the reins to Giorgio Tavecchio. And, then, I mean, he was a disaster in preseason, so they kind of went back to Matt Bryant, anyway. But yeah, that'll definitely be something to watch. And yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to imagine that the Falcons will be as bad at the kicking game as they were last year post week 5.
Yeah, that's my hope, and we'll see. We haven't really heard much from Koo. Last season it was all about him changing his stance, and I think it was his windup. As you guys can see, obviously Tre'Shon wasn't able to join us tonight. He had something come up. This would be the perfect, Tre'Shon interlude here, because I know he was extensively studying and working on, Younghoe Koo's changes to his kicking. That obviously didn't work out very well for Koo. It seemed to affect his accuracy substantially. So I wonder if he's just going to go back to his old method or what's going on there. But the Falcons did bring in some, competition in Lenny Krieg, who apparently was a pretty hot name after his sort of workout where, he nailed a bunch of kicks, and the Falcons kind of quickly gave him a 2-year deal with some guarantees to get him in Atlanta for this competition. So it seems like unlike some years where they've brought in a college kicker, but it was sort of this isn't really serious. This could be a serious competition, because not only does Koo have to prove that he's back to form, but he has to prove that he's demonstrably better than Lenny Krieg because of the aforementioned salary cap costs that Koo has. And I'm certainly pulling for Koo. I think he's one of the favorite players for a lot of people. He's a great story, fun guy, really likable. I hope that he does pull it together. I hope this all works out. But it was smart of the team to bring in some kind of insurance and something to sort of gently push him to make sure that we get this right. Because like you said, this team probably could have made the playoffs last year if Koo had been himself, right? If Koo had played to his typical standard, this team makes the playoffs. It's not an issue. So,
oh yeah, I mean, I can easily name you 3 games where the team lost because of kicking woes. The Saints game, obviously, where I think Koo missed 3 field goals. I think it was
3, yeah.
Yeah, the Chargers game, I know that the big story was Kirk Cousins throwing paper airplanes and 4 interceptions in that game. But Koo also did miss a kick in that game, which, I know this isn't the way it works exactly, but you add 3 points to that score for the Falcons, and they don't have to score a touchdown on that final drive. I think they could have been in position to possibly tie it with a field goal. And then Koo was at this point on IR, but the Washington game where you had the 56-yard field goal for the win,
yeah,
and you came up short on it. and that's a kick where I know it's not a gimme, but it is one where that was for the game. Like the weather conditions were fine, and at this point, professional kickers, 55, 56 yards, it's the kicking game has advanced to the point where you should sort of be, hitting that like more often than not, and it didn't even reach its target.
No, that was I think that's sort of why. Apologies, I can't even remember his name now. I'm gonna look it up because I don't
Yeah,
want to disrespect the man, but
I'm
um,
blanking. I'm blanking on it
Riley
too. But
Patterson.
Riley
Yeah,
Patterson.
yeah.
Well, read it at the same time. Yeah, Riley Patterson, like he accurate, like inside
The
50.
kick was on
Yeah,
point. It just didn't have the
was
distance.
right down the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
Riley Patterson is one of the only. I mean, out of all of the free agent kickers, like there were a few like decent ones available. You picked the one that like can't kick from like longer than 52 yards, 52, 53 yards, and it's like it really sort of bit you in the ass. And I mean, Riley Patterson made a decent number of kicks with the Lions, and the Lions still moved on from him because they recognize that, hey, you have to be able to kick these 55 yarders, in today's league, if unless you want to be put at a disadvantage, because it seems like the majority of kickers are just nailing these 55, 56 yarders these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's just the expectation that's where the kicking game is. And the Falcons were like one of the teams, unfortunately, that were the victim of that. I think they had what, one or two that I think they had the smallest percentage of kicks missed against them of any team. Like I think it was like we got to like week 7 or 8 before a team missed a kick against Atlanta.
Yeah, that was just bad luck.
Yeah, that's just bad luck. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about that. But it's just sort of, I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? So wild stuff. But yeah, the Falcons didn't didn't get any benefit there. So unfortunately, that can happen. And yeah, let me pull it up. Field goal percent made. Yes, Falcons #1 in the NFL. They had 96.9% of kicks made against them. One miss out of 32 attempts. One miss.
Yeah.
Just
And
terrible luck. Yeah.
You can't really expect that to be a repeat occurrence. I mean, if it happens again, then it's like you just throw your hands up and it's like it is what it is.
Yeah.
Just like how it was what it was last year. But yeah, there's some very fine things within the margins where, if you put yourself in very similar positions that you were in last year, like some things that didn't go your way are sort of bound to go your way, and then who knows what could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like if you get some regression to the mean in that, sense, like the average team, so we'll say the 16th ranked team was the Green Bay Packers and the Jacksonville Jaguars at 17. They both have basically the same thing. 85% made field goals against is the average. So the Falcons had 10% more made against them. And the most lucky team in the Cleveland Browns had only 71% of kicks made against them. They had 9 missed kicks against. And the Bucks had 11 missed kicks against. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy, like how that can swing games, but it's just it is what it is.
I mean, that may have swung the division in
I mean, it's very possible. Tampa had very good luck. Yeah.
Yeah. The division came down to week 18 last year. I mean, there was, a moment, the majority of Sunday, the Falcons were in first place in the NFC South. It had the scorelines stay the way they had stay the way that they were. Atlanta was beating Carolina. The Saints were beating Tampa throughout most of that game. So it's like, yeah, 10 missed kicks. Like, yeah, of course that had like played a part in it. Like at the end of the day, like sometimes it is just, bad luck, which decides something. The margins are very fine, but also like, fortune favors the bold. You have to put yourself in position to where that luck can sort of get you over the hump if it goes your way.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, regression to the mean should help Atlanta. Notably, like I said, the Bucks were the #2 most lucky team in field goals made against, and the Saints were the 8th most lucky. The Saints also had 9 kicks missed against. So, maybe we could see some beneficial regression to the mean in multiple facets. The Panthers were right around average. They had 85.7% kicks missed against, or kicks hit. So, they were right around average. So, that's not something you can like quantify or like really I mean, unless you block kicks, right? But that doesn't happen very often, even for the best teams, right? So, that's one thing to monitor, and that's a good thing to bring up. Offensively, though, like outside of, it seems like the team is super confident in Ryan Newsel. The good news is we did see him play, 8 games or whatever it was last year, which is a good enough sample size that I think you're ultimately my takeaway as like an original Ryan Newsel stan from like back like 3 years ago, where I was like, oh yeah, he's going to make the roster as a center, all this stuff. I like Ryan Newsel. I think he's probably like a solid starting center, like league average starting center. And that's fine. You can get by with that. The team needed to get cheaper on the offensive line. I get the idea behind like not wanting to pay a center like Drew Dahlman, who's not a great pass protector, as you sort of adjust your offense to be more pass pro focused. So I get that. But like Newsel, the run game's going to suffer. There's no doubt about that. So they're going to have to find ways to improve there. Maybe part of that is Matthew Bergeron taking a step as a run blocker. He definitely took a step as a pass blocker last year, but the run blocking was still not amazing for Bergeron. So maybe that's a pathway to more success. We'll see. Obviously, I think we're all pretty confident in Jake Matthews continuing to be rock solid. Can Caleb McGarry take a step as a pass protector? He's continued to hone his game. I think he has improved. The Falcons seemingly are not willing to commit to him long term at this point, so we'll see. But yeah.
I mean, also the other big thing in the equation is McGarry and Matthews will now be, essentially is switching like tackle role. Like normally the right tackle is, the guy who covers like in front of a quarterback, and the left tackle covers the quarterback's blind side. Michael Penix is, famously a lefty. So now I do think that will make things easier for Jake Matthews. It could maybe even extend his career, like just slightly. And then like for McGarry, it comes down to, can he cover, your quarterback's blind side? And we'll see if he's up to that, because I mean there's Storm Norton like on the roster as well, who I think is one of the best swing tackles in the NFL. But McGarry has always been a much better run blocker than pass blocker. He's gotten better as a pass protector, and it feels like every year he's taken and improved. He's gotten more improved as a pass protector. Hopefully that continues. But yeah, now it's like it becomes really, really important that Caleb McGarry, take that next step as a pass protector, because he is covering the blind side now.
Yeah. So that's going to be critical, and that's going to be something to watch, and probably why they haven't extended him, because I think they want to see if he's okay, you're going to be the blindside guy, McGarry. Let's see it. And I think some people are reading like too much into this and being like the Falcons are planning to completely move on from McGarry. I don't think so. I think the team is open and perhaps even like hoping to re-sign McGarry. I think they like him. I think they love his run blocking. He's one of the best run blocking right tackles in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. So they like that. He's an impact player there. He's been a solid pass protector. I think they need more from him there. And that's basically what they're looking to see. Like, can he get good enough there that we feel comfortable having him as Michael Penix's blindside? And if not, we may have to move on there. And if he does, then he probably will get extended. So we'll see. But the offense, like ultimately, like yes, the loss of Dahlman is going to be felt, but I think the offense as a whole ultimately could be better, given multiple factors. And we mentioned it, like Penix having experience in the offense and just being overall a much more dynamic quarterback than Kirk Cousins. Zach Robinson entering his second year as the coordinator, that typically helps guys a lot. I mean, think about, this Kyle Shanahan wasn't a first-time offensive coordinator like Zach Robinson was, but the second year in the system a lot of times you can see teams take a big leap. So that could be something. And that's obviously a big hope. So we're hoping on that because the Falcons are absolutely planning for the offense to be the engine of the team. That's been sort of their ethos since Arthur Smith was the head coach. Unfortunately, there was never enough ethos placed on quarterback until he left, but that's just nothing we can do about that. It seems like that's continued in Pittsburgh, unfortunately, for Steelers fans. But the real question is the defense, and that's where we saw the majority of this team's resources go this offseason. The defense. We saw the team brought in Leonard Floyd to be a veteran pass rushing presence that they could depend on to get them, pass rush production. They brought in Divine Diablo as sort of a wild card, like sort of will linebacker that can actually cover because they just really lacked a coverage linebacker. I think Diablo is going to be their primary coverage linebacker. They needed to reinforce the secondary. They brought back Mike Hughes to be the CB2, where he was actually pretty good last year. They did bring back D'Alford as an option in the slot. I think the scheme matters a lot for D'Alford and how well he can fit in there. If they're going to let D'Alford play more man, he's probably okay. But we also saw, of course, in the draft, they brought in other options to compete there. At safety, they brought in Jordan Fuller to help, bolster that group as a box guy, a guy that can tackle really well and give you something on the back end. So you add the draft picks to the equation where they do add two impact pass rushers, or what should be impact pass rushers, in Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. They add a big time, nickel addition in Billy Bowman Jr. And of course, a guy who we all expect to start at safety opposite Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts, who's personally my favorite pick of the draft, given where he was taken. This is what we didn't see in free agency. The free agency was kind of and this is something, like, to be fair, that they've done in multiple free agencies under Fontenot, especially when they haven't had money. They've kind of tried to paper over the holes on the roster with guys that can contribute. They're not necessarily making you sleep well at night. Like Jordan Fuller as safety 2 didn't exactly fill me with confidence, but Fuller's a competent safety, right? That's fine. Divine Diablo, is he some Pro Bowl caliber linebacker? I don't think so, but is he a capable linebacker that gives the Falcons an option if Troy Anderson's not around to actually be an athlete at the linebacker position? Yes, he does. This is the type of guys they brought in. They also, I think, were selective with the guys they brought back, letting, I think LaCale London's really interesting now that he's going to supposedly be playing nose tackle at 330. They brought back Taquan Graham to be one of their run defenders, that sort of thing. So they've kind of added pieces there. And then they used the draft to sort of add the impact guys that we're hoping for. And it left me feeling a lot better about the trajectory of this defense, given that now I think we do have impact players at all levels that simply weren't there before the draft.
Also the other thing with the defense, which I think will be better versus last year, is just coaching in general. You can think what you want about Ulbrich. You can have liked that hire, not like that hire, but I don't think that I'm going out on a limb here by saying that he is objectively a better defensive coach than Jimmy Lake, just in general. I do think that this defensive scheme with Lake did, leave little to be desired last year coming into the bye week, especially when you do look at how much the pass rush especially improved after the bye week, after Raheem Morris reportedly, started having more of a hand in the defensive preparation and probably in some of the defensive play calls. Jimmy Lake was probably like a heavy liability last season. And I do think that Ulbrich, even if he gives you, average, defensive coaching, that's going to be a vast improvement from Lake, who is probably one of the worst defensive coordinators in the league last year, especially given the fact that this defense did start that sort of upward trajectory a little bit after the bye week. I'm not a believer of year over year, we had a great finish last year, so we're automatically going to have a great start to this year. That's what kept Dan Quinn his job after the team won like 5 straight games in like 2018. But I do think that there is something there in that, you saw the defense improve when Morris sort of had, a bit more of a hand in it. So I do think that just given that sort of data, you can be a little more confident just in terms of the coaching, and that the coaching will sort of be more of a benefit versus a liability this year, because it was definitely a liability on the defensive side of the football last season. But yeah, as for impact playmakers, yeah, I mean the defense last year, let's be honest, Matthew Judon was washed up. Like he did not really do what we expected him to do. He was disappointing last season. He wasn't worth the 3rd-round pick. Justin Simmons was fine. He was okay. The linebackers whom we had higher hopes for going into the season sort of regressed overall. Troy Anderson had a good half against the Saints, and that's pretty much everything we've seen from him in his NFL career.
Good 4 quarters, okay. It was unfortunate.
Yeah,
that was his best game of his career, unfortunately, and then hurt on special teams. So
yeah, I mean we'll always have that. We'll always have that pick 6 against the Saints, to fall back on with Anderson.
Yeah.
Nate Landman heavily regressed. He wasn't very good last year. Caden Ellis was very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like overall, I feel like last year you sort of were completely reliant on, Jesse Bates making a big play for you, or, someone forcing a fumble, or, like you were too reliant on individual brilliance last year. And that's fine to a certain extent. But when that's all you have, like there will come games where, you don't get that bit of individual brilliance like in that game. And I feel like we were seeing, early on in the season, especially like, that individual brilliance with the Troy Anderson pick 6 where Judon had the forced fumble. That we had wonderful, like you had the forced fumble on Bucky Irving that, forced the ball backwards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which gave you an opportunity to even get it to overtime. Like you did have these moments of individual brilliance, and then in those later games when that didn't happen, your defense sort of collapsed like a house of cards. And hopefully this year with the coaching and with, some more impact at every phase of the football, you can sort of rely more on, the play-to-play aspect, and you can rely more on, the defense doing what they're supposed to more so in the mundane throughout the course of the game versus, okay, I need a playmaker to just make a play to flip this game on its head, because that doesn't always happen. And then when it does happen, it'll be even better because, okay, now you have, that should pick your defense up even more, even another notch. So, hopefully we won't just be fully reliant on individual brilliance the way that they seem to have been last year, especially in the first half of that season.
Yeah, and George Costanza coming in hot with I think the Falcons are going to go 17-0, win the Super Bowl. So I think I have reasonable expectations. Yeah, very reasonable. That's a reasonable ask. I think.
Me up for that, George. I mean,
that's a reasonable ask. No, I mean, I like mostly what I like. I mean, I like the players. That helps, a lot. That I did really like the picks. I did like the fit of guys. I liked the picks. I liked the value. I liked all of it. Other than that, like the strategy and the plan that they had for these guys, they had a plan for these guys immediately. They knew what they were asking them to do. And I really appreciated that. Like it feels so much more like these guys have a real idea of how they want to run this defense, where guys are going to line up, where guys are going to play, what's happening. It makes so much more sense to me than what we saw last year. Like I never understood the, Zach Harrison to interior, right? Never really got that. I think that was a really dumb move, and now he's moving back to the edge. So thank God. They didn't really seem to have a plan for Brandon Dorlus. They didn't really seem to have their plan for Rukaroro seemed to be to just have him ride the bench as long as possible, which I don't love for a second round pick, right? But this year there does seem to be a bigger and much more cohesive plan for what this team's going to do, where these rookies are going to play, where they're going to get snaps. We're not going to throw everyone into a giant, Yahtzee cup of dice and just see who rolls where. We're going to actually have guys competing right from the beginning at the spots they need to compete for. And, I think it makes sense that we'll see, probably see D. Alford, retain his slot role to start training camp, but we're going to see the slot guys right away competing him with him. We're not going to have this whole thing where it's like, oh, is Billy Bowman a safety? Is he this? Is he that? We're going to get Bowman competing with D. Alford and the other guys that are mixing in that room right off the bat. We're going to get competitions here, there, everywhere. It seems like there's so much more clarity about what the plan is, where guys are playing, and I think that fills me with more hope than anything, because it just seemed like last year the biggest issue was there just didn't seem to be a cohesive plan for the defense. The offense did have a plan. It was rocky at times, didn't always work, but there was a plan on offense. Defense, I just never felt like they had a clear plan, and it really, really hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back. All that sort of goes back to coaching, though. It's like it was just, and I mean, I'm not giving Morris a reprieve here either. Like, he's the one that did bring in Jimmy Lake, and his scheme was still what it was, to start the season. I do think that they I hope that they learned from some of their mistakes last year in regards to, maybe they have, because like you said, they are giving guys specific roles, and I'm sure that that's immensely helpful to a rookie, that you're coming into a team and hey, this is my primary role. This is what the expectation is going to be from day one. This is where I'm going to be. This is what I need to focus on, versus, okay, like, you come in and you're sort of a tweener in a way of, you don't know what exactly will be. I mean, a lot will be asked of you, but you don't know, is this going to be more important? Excuse me. Is this going to be more important? Like, it's already hard enough coming into the NFL from college. And you have to, everyone says you have to adjust to the speed of the game. You have to adjust to, facing guys who are much better than pretty much anyone you faced in college. And it's just rosters full of these guys. I think you sort of do these rookies a disservice by not making things as easy as possible from the mental aspect of the game and from that pre-snap aspect of the game, because it's already so much to process after the snap happens, to the point where, I mean, I can see how it can be very overwhelming if you have to process all of this before the snap as well.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll see how this all plays out, but I like the conviction. I like the plan. I think the rookies are going to benefit a lot from this setup as opposed to last year. And I think this sort of leads us to our overall question of, like, have the Falcons improved? And I think yes. Have they improved enough to win the division? I think that's hard. I think to where they can win the division. Yes, I think they could have won the division last year. I think it's obvious they could have. I think if Kirk Cousins doesn't do what he did, however you want to phrase what he did, I don't know if we'll ever know the whole truth, like, of everything that went on with that. Then I think the Falcons make the playoffs. If they don't have the missed kicks, they probably make the playoffs. Like, this team beat the Buccaneers twice. They swept them. I think you could argue that the Falcons were better than the Buccaneers in some facets. They just didn't play consistently. That was their biggest weakness. And neither did the Bucs, for that matter. I mean, the Bucs had their issues last year too. So people talking about the Bucs as this, invincible enemy, or this, like, looming threat in the division, like, the Bucs have been extremely fortunate that the Falcons crapped the bed for the last, like, 3 years. Like,
it wasn't just last year. Even with a team where Desmond Ridder was predominantly the starter, the Falcons should have won the division 2 years ago. like Younghoe Koo missing those kicks against Tampa Bay in the home matchup against Tampa, like that cost the team the division. Like you win that game and you're gonna win the NFC South that year. Now, who knows, the makeup of this team and what this team looks like now if that happens, because Arthur Smith would have kept his job if had the team won the division a couple of years ago, and then that's sort of one of those alternate
butterfly effects.
reality.
Yeah, butterfly effect situation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a butterfly effect situation, alternate reality of like how would the team look like now, had that happened. But yeah, it's like it's sort of been more so the Falcons getting in their own way versus like Tampa Bay really like, and I don't want to discredit Tampa Bay. They did do what they were supposed to. They did win the games down the stretch they needed to win to put that pressure on Atlanta last year and the year before. And the Falcons sort of under that pressure just collapsed. And I mean, it will, you do have to have that mental wherewithal this year too, because you could feasibly, very easily be coming down the stretch. Maybe everything is in your hands again this year. And just like it was the last couple of years, and it will come down to this team, this coaching staff, Michael Penix, this roster to sort of get over that hump versus, okay, will it just be another, here we go again. We're going to, crap the bed down the stretch once again and hand this division on a silver platter to probably Tampa Bay. I don't think Carolina is ready to compete for the division, even though they had a very good draft. New Orleans, I don't know what the hell New Orleans is doing.
I think this is the year that the bottom falls out for New Orleans. I've been saying that, I know, the last 2 years. This time it's really going to happen though. Like, I mean, that team is.
I do think it'll come down to Atlanta versus Tampa Bay again for this NFC South. And I mean, Tampa Bay has experience winning this division. They're confident. They should be confident. They've won it 4 years in a row. I'd be confident if I was Tampa Bay. But I mean, they know from a mental perspective what needs to be done to win the division. The Falcons haven't done it yet, and the Falcons will need to prove that they can, get it done this year. Because I mean, last year you beat Tampa twice. You had everything in your hands, and you still couldn't get it done.
Yeah. So I mean, we have to see them actually put it together and actually find a way. But I think roster wise, they're in a position where they can, and we'll have to see if they can execute. And we're obviously waiting to see if Penix is what everyone hopes that he is. As excited as we all are for that, and based on what we've seen, I think it's fair to be excited. We don't know. It's only 3 games. We've seen some quarterbacks look like gods for 3 games and then completely fall off a cliff. For the record, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Penix. I don't think that's going to happen. I also think, he's probably going to look a little bit more average than people think, at least right out of the gate. This is still a guy that's essentially a rookie at this point. So, temper your expectations a little bit for Penix, but I do think we're going to come away from this season pretty happy with him. And, ultimately, I think it's sort of up to Penix and the offense to win games, but I think it's sort of up to this defense to just not cost. I think maybe that's the cleanest way to put it. The Falcons have improved the offense to the point where it's up to the offense to win, and they've improved the defense to the point where it's up to the defense not to lose, right? Like, the defense just needs to not lose the team the game, and I think they'll be fine. Last year, those 3 games, the defense lost in the game. I guess you could say, like, the Washington game, I think they played their asses off in that Washington game. Like, the defense was clearly overmatched in that game, but I think that was one of their better performances. I mean, we saw what the Commanders did to far better defenses later after that matchup. So
I'd argue that D'Angelo Malone lost that game.
Well, fair enough. Shout out to D'Angelo Malone. Sure he feels terrible, but yeah, I think the defense, like, honestly, like, really, like, gave it their all that game. And if they played like that the whole season against some lesser opponents, they probably would have been a lot better. But after that game, it just felt like the air was completely out of Atlanta's sails, except for the offense. The offense played their ass off in the final week. But yeah, I do think the team has improved. I think the Falcons have improved in a meaningful way. Now all that's left to do is to actually execute on that improvement. Take that improvement and turn it into wins. Wins on the field. You can't just win the offseason, right? You got to win the games. And I think that's where we are. And so far, This team hasn't shown that they can win the game. So this is your chance. This is your time. You kind of have to now with this trade you pulled for James Pierce, which I think it's good. I think it's a good trade. I think it will ultimately be a good trade, but you can't lose, right? You're in a situation now where you can't lose anymore. Like in years past, it's like if everything crashed and burned, you get a pick to console yourself with. You get something to reload with. There's no pick coming. There's no reinforcements over the hill. You gotta win with this team. You've gone all in on this team, this roster, as like we're gonna be good enough now to make the playoffs, and we don't need a first round pick next year because this team is good enough. So they got to go prove it. They got to prove it now. That's where we're at. Do you think they can, Adnan? Do you think they can prove it?
I mean, yeah, I don't see why not. Like, I feel like it would be a very miserable time and the vibes would be very bad if we were, spring hope's eternal. Like, it's May, it's still technically spring, I think. Yeah, it's still technically spring. Yeah. I feel like it would be very miserable if we were sitting here in May and we were like, yeah, no, I don't think the Falcons are going to do it. It's going to be another losing year, especially, after, they make this pick, after they make this bold trade up, they get this extra pass rusher. We're just going to gift wrap the Rams like a top half, first round pick next year. Like there's fan bases with teams who are in much worse situations going into 2025 who have more hope than that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, of course I think they can do it. Like, could they have done it last year? Yeah, for sure. Could they have done it 2 years ago with subpar quarterback play? Yes. It's just this year you just need that something. You just need that something extra to sort of get you over that hump. What will it be? Will it be Michael Penix? Maybe, hopefully. Will it be some extra luck? Will it be improvements in the coaching staff? Will it be, having a team where the rookies actually contribute? Because, I mean, last year you didn't really get any contributions from the rookie class up until the very end of the season where you had Michael Penix, playing his ass off against the Panthers. So, yeah, like at the end of the day, I don't know what exactly it will be, but I know that the ingredients are there. I feel like this team has everything they need to win the division this year. It just comes down to the execution, and it's not the most exciting answer. It is the boring, like, mundane answer of like you just have to execute. It's what you'll hear coaches saying all the time, coach speak, GM speak, but that's sort of what it is for this team. Like everything is in place in the NFC South. Like nobody's telling you to go win the AFC North here. Like nobody's telling you to go, win the NFC North. Like you're in one of the weakest divisions in the NFL, arguably the weakest division in the NFL. The talent is that like you have everything you need to win it, and now it's just go out there on the field and prove that you can do it.
Yeah. Yes. Sounds so simple when you say it like that. Sounds so easy. Just go win. Yeah, I agree though that they just got to do it. Like you got to find a way to do it. Nobody's been able to figure it out here in Atlanta since 2017. Eventually, someone's gonna have to figure it out. So I hope these guys can do it. Certainly. Let's get to the questions real quick before we sign off tonight. We have JM Huddle with the $5. Thanks, JM. Appreciate you. Says, this might be the first time in 5 years that it could be exciting to play as the Falcons in Madden. Yeah. I mean, I think those two pass rushers I think Jalen Walker will be like an elite, like player controlled guy. Like, I think he's going to be crazy. So, I usually dreaded playing the Falcons on defense, but yeah. And they got Felipe Franks back, the goated Wildcat quarterback. So
yeah, I won't lie. I haven't played Madden in a very long time. Like it used to be my up through high school, like through undergrad, like it was through college years. Like it was definitely I would buy the new Madden every year. And I mean, the Falcons teams of the mid 2010s were very fun. And then, it got to be less fun later on after that. But yeah, I mean, look, you'll have some speed. I don't know if speed maybe one of the Madden players who are like one of the current Madden players can shed some light, on the game for me because it's been so long. But I don't know if you can still abuse speed like in that game the way that you used to be able to before. So I mean, if that's the case, the team should have some speed, like on the defense. A couple playmakers at the safety tandem. So it's should definitely be a fun time for the Madden players. Maybe the Falcons can, with some wins, with some roster updates, maybe the Falcons can be one of those go-to like teams that you like, pick in online head-to-head or something.
Yeah. So that could be very, very exciting for a change. We got George Costanza with the $2. What's up, George? Says, for the first year of that Falcoholic draft coverage giveaway, we offered a Ritter jersey and then everyone logged off. So we've come a long way since then. I don't remember that, George. I think this might be some revisionist history here, but yeah. He says, Ritter Heinicke took 10 years off my life. Go, Michael Penix 9. Yeah, I definitely feel better about the current quarterback situation. There's no doubt about that.
I won't lie. It's not very efficient for us to have made it a Ritter jersey because every jersey costs the exact same. So at that point, like, why a Ritter jersey? But I digress.
Yeah. You don't believe in Desmond Ritter? Come on. We got Corey with the $2 asking, after 2025, we could move off the Cousins contract dead money free, right? The short answer, Corey, is it depends. It depends on what they do in the next month. So real quick with Kirk Cousins, if they were to trade him before June 1st, then yes, there would be no dead money next year. All of his dead money would be off the books. The Falcons would save about $2.5 million, assuming they don't touch the contract, which is probably unlikely, but that's all I can go off of. If they touch the contract, I don't know. That'll change everything. But the Falcons will eat all 37 or whatever million of his dead money that's on the contract with this pre-June 1st trade. It'll all be off the books this year, which is why they only save a little bit, but there will be no more dead money next year. If they were to do it post-June 1st, some of the money gets moved to next year, but ultimately it doesn't really matter because they save a lot more cash this year. So the amount of money doesn't change. As long as you trade him, the amount of money is exactly the same, unless you get into the season and games start being played, in which case his salary will be paid out on a weekly basis. Then the contract, that'll change things. But for now, we'll assume that's not going to happen. So if the Falcons trade Kirk post June 1st, they can save $27.5 million, and there will be some dead cap pushed to next year. And that is, that's because of the way post June 1st works. It sort of slashes your dead cap in half and splits it. But yes, there would be dead money next year in that scenario, but the Falcons could sort of not spend this extra cap space this year and hold it in reserve to sort of offset his dead money next year. And then effectively you'd be going into next year with surplus cap that you could then use to pay off the dead money, and close enough. But yeah, ultimately his dead money next year is not a big deal. The only problem is if they can't trade him, and then they owe him an extra $10 million roster bonus next year. That makes the dead cap a little bit more, but again, even that can be offset by him getting signed by another team. So, the long answer and the short answer is it's complicated, but they could get off dead money free. They might not. More than likely they won't, but it probably won't matter too much because there's just not that much dead money. If they trade him at all, they will have limited the dead money pretty significantly. That was a long-winded explanation. We got George Costanza with the $2 saying, if Michael Penix becomes a top 5 quarterback, we will win the Super Bowl. The defense will be good enough to get stops. We could get a lead and pound the ball in the second half. Man, I feel like I've been asking for that for about 7 years now. I think Michael Penix 9 could be an MVP candidate with all the weapons he has. People are sleeping. Yeah, I mean, definitely Penix isn't really getting talked about. I think there's some sort of QB guru types that are really excited about him. But yeah, I mean, he's only started 3 games and the Falcons just weren't all that interesting of a team last year. So yeah, I don't think anyone's really going to be talking about him on a national stage, but if the Falcons start hot and Penix is out there slinging the ball around and Falcons offense is red hot to start the season, then people will start talking about him pretty quick. So
I'm very curious, and we're gonna find this out. What is it, the 7th? We're gonna find this out about 7 days from now when the schedule drops. I'm very curious to see what nationally televised games the Falcons will have this year. Because remember, last year they had a lot. The first 4 or 5 weeks they had 3 nationally televised. They had the Chiefs game. They had not the Steelers game. Later on, they had the Commanders game. I think that one was flexed, but I'm not entirely.
It was, yeah.
But they had they had the Raiders game at the end of the season. I'm forgetting who they played week 2 on
the Eagles.
The Eagles game. Yeah. How could I forget? The Falcons are one of
the goated game of the season. Yeah.
Falcons are one of 3 teams to beat the Eagles last year.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm curious if because those games were all very exciting. All of them were exciting. So I'm curious to see if the NFL, goes back to the well and is okay, the Falcons are going to be an exciting team for better or for worse. They're going to be exciting no matter what. Even when we don't want them to be exciting, it's going to be an exciting finish. So, maybe the NFL taps into that and gives us another 4 or 5 nationally televised games, in which case Michael Penix will definitely have a chance to sort of showcase himself to a national audience.
Yeah. No, I don't know that they'll get as many as last year, but I do think they'll get some. It's not going to be like a couple of years ago, like the Ritter year where they had none. I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know if they'll have as many because, I think with Kirk, they were all right, they got Kirk Cousins. We got to give them some, but I'm curious to see. I think they'll have 2. That's my guess. A Thursday night and then another one. And then obviously there's a lot of opportunities to be flexed, if you've only got 2. So we'll see, but that's sort of my guess. But yeah, George has one final question for the night, and it's for Adnan. It says final questions, excuse me. One of them is for Adnan. Did you get those chocolate Twizzlers, Adnan? I thought you answered this last week. Yeah.
I forgot. George, I forgot. I will do it at some point in the off season, or I'll at least try to find them. I don't know if they're going to be at my local Publix or not, but I will. I'll do my best to go out there, to make a trip out there to see if they're out there.
Yeah. Okay. That's a promise. We're gonna see. We're gonna take steps.
Look, I can't do anything about it if they don't have it.
That's true. That's true. That's the best you got. Yeah, we're not expecting you to smuggle chocolate Twizzlers in or anything like that at this point. So, the next question: are we doing the restaurant meetup? I assume you mean for training camp. Yes, I would like to do that again. I don't know if we'll have it back at I don't know if we'll have it back at Sweetwater or if we'll look at some other locations. I haven't reached out to Sweetwater yet about that. Hopefully we'll have more to share about our training camp plans with you guys soon, hopefully within the next week or so. I also don't know the dates of training camp yet, so that's something else. But yeah, I would love to do that. I think we would all like to do another meetup. I think that was a lot of fun, and we'd like to plan it much further in advance this time, so that everybody has an opportunity to actually, get there. And then George, his final question: have I passed 3,000 donated yet on Streamlabs? My fiance wants to know. Yes, George. The answer is yes. You are at 3,079.69. Nice. So yes, you have officially passed 3,000 in donations. And we're very appreciative of that, obviously. Thank you so much, George. I know some of that is your donations for the giveaways and stuff like that, but that obviously does count too. So, yes, thank you so much, George, for your generous support. Thank you guys all. She's not mad, she says. Yeah, well, it's a good cause, right? Maybe. I think it's a good cause, but if I didn't think it was a good cause, then I don't think I'd be here. So, but we do appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Appreciate George. And his donations. Appreciate Corey. Appreciate everyone else donating tonight. Everyone who has, thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Please subscribe as well, if you don't mind that. That helps us a lot too. And if you do want to support the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or the YouTube channel memberships. We'll have more shows coming for you guys. I believe I'll have a roster projection coming soon, so stay on the lookout for that. We'll have a show with Tre'Shon hopefully next week. I've got Joe Patrick coming on Wednesday to continue breaking down how this team looks going into rookie minicamp and the offseason. Hopefully get some rookie minicamp updates from Joe as well, which is Friday, by the way, guys. Rookie minicamp starts Friday. So we'll have lots of good stuff coming. We're going to have to, extract all the intel and information we can from these mini camps and OTAs through the first part of June, because then it will be complete radio silence basically until training camp in July. So we got another month or so of actual stuff to talk about, and then we will have to enter the dead zone, but a little bit longer before we get there. And we're going to take you guys through, no matter what, through the darkness. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for supporting the show, everyone. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm Kevin, I have Falcoholic Kevin. He's Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. We will talk to you guys next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks. Thanks.